plenty of material, which is awesome. And yeah, I think this is great. If anyone has any more material, please let me know. We'll add it. Tomorrow's streams. But it's great to have enough material to look over. Let's get started. The first game was sent on the Discord. That's Chess Study Discord. So I think a few of you guys are from Chess Study Discord. That works great as a channel to send games. If you go to the post game section of that, I'll just take straight from there. And to take a look at them on the stream. This is a game played by JD Mintz, and it's a Queen's Pawn game against the Grunfeld, and yeah, let's see if it provides an opportunity to do some analysis on the Grunfeld. Knight f3, pawn takes c4. This is a pretty early take on c4. There is a line that where take c4 is the standard. But more frequently, I think basically pawn takes c4 comes after it comes after queen b3. So here d takes c4, e4, castles, bishop takes c4, and white has healthy development. I guess that sort of follows from the the standard Queen's Gambit accepted stream where this bishop gets developed to c4. But I think that pawn takes c4 does provide white with good center and some advantages. Anyways, d5, bishop g5, bishop g7, knight f3, and then this is the deviation move, pawn takes c4. On e4, there's castles, bishop takes c4, bishop g4, bishop e2. And white's I think black's gonna have a difficult time breaking through this structure. I think knight fd7. By the way, we're still in book. So this knight fd7 move is pretty well explored, even with the early pawn takes c4. Castles here, knight b6, bishop b3, and overall, white's sort of consolidated a conservative center. But we're still pretty comfortably in theory. So here, knight to c6, and then the main move here is d5. But instead, white plays a different variation, e5. This is pretty interesting. White does advance his center in a lot of the Grunfeld games. That's not an uncommon thing to do. So here, d5, actually, sorry, is the game. So these pawns get a bit loose. Sometimes there's some undermining threats on e7. Basically, if black isn't careful, these advanced pawns have the potential, to get through. Say like black plays c5. White might ignore the en passant threat and instead play e5 and d6. That kind of thing does happen. Here, d5, and then is the move. But I got a little bit confused here. The actual game move was h3. The two basically the two moves here are that were in book were d5 and e5. But this is the actual game position. So knight to c6, and then e5 with this discovered threat on a8. Black's required to defend this, so queen d7 is probably the move. But I don't know. Bishop takes a8, and then knight to e4, queen takes, and I think basically black's in a fairly good position. Queen d8. White's in a good position. This material gain for white is going to be difficult for black to go up against. Bishop f8, and here I think basically white looks okay. King h1, and there are some type of mate threats, but hey, thank you very much for joining the stream, Houseline. Appreciate it. Yeah, so here basically, rook f1, rook f pressure on f7, I think are the ideas. But yeah, overall, threats on f7 are pretty powerful. That f7 pawn falls, and then white's got a pretty good position going into the endgame. So let's take a look at a few different pieces of this. This plays, this is a pretty well played game. It goes through the opening line to a pretty serious depth. I mean, we're on move 9 or 10 by the time that that there's any kind of deviation from the opening book. I mean, even here, which so the number two choice here was pawn takes c4. Like it's a distant second here. The number one choice is knight e4 with uh, basically 3,000 games, and d takes c4 has only 400. So knight e4 is the general response. Um, Hey, Drayson. Uh, okay, all right. Thank you very much for sending that, and we just took a look at that. I'm glad you sent the game on this stream. So let's take a look at if it's all right. I think we can get a I think we can get that in for tomorrow morning if that's all right. Um, we're working out how to do the basically the sign up sheet is still kind of a work in progress. But uh, basically our we're still working things out. Uh, I'm taking games in from a few different sources, but yeah. So Jen, if Jen has put together a sign up sheet on Sign Up Genius, um, and I think basically this uh, basically this type of a game is, basically we're working on some of the administrative stuff is the point. Um, but the games will all get looked at, and you can send them via any channel. Jen put together that sign up sheet, but feel free to send them in the stream or send them on the Discord. But yeah, sorry about that issue, and I'm glad that game will for sure 100% get looked at. So thank you very much for sending it in, and we'll look at it tomorrow morning. But yeah, sorry for the difficulty. We'll try to get that right, and it'll be working before too long. Still working out some of the kinks on this strategy. And Jen just posted the link to the Discord, which is super helpful too. This is a Discord that's specifically dedicated to this channel, and you can post games on there if there's any issues with anything else. So yeah, so basically any channel works, and everything's gonna get looked at. I promise. We'll get through all of it. Um, it's real. I really appreciate the participation. I mean, this stream works based on people being willing and interested in sending in games. So I promise anything that you send in will get looked at. Um, Interesting. Okay. Well, in any case, Drayson, we have it now, and we'll look at it tomorrow morning. Sorry for the difficulty. Still very much in the early stages here. But yeah, overall, we're still in theory here with an early pawn takes c4, uh, and h3, bishop takes f3. But let's look. So here's the move that deviates from theory here. Knight fd7 is the number one choice, c5 is the second choice, and h6 is the third choice. B6 is not something that's been played in a master game, but let's take a look at the analysis. So b6, b6 is a plus 2.37. So I think that is objectively better than or objectively better for white, so objectively worse for black than some of the book moves. On knight fd7, the thing is basically plus 1.3 or something. So I think b6 is not as good as the more explored knight fd7, but in any case, we sort of move towards we move towards an interesting situation. Um, Here, bishop takes f H3 makes sense and pressures the bishop. Bishop takes F3, I think, is a little bit, probably too aggressive. There's not a great place to put that bishop, but now this bishop is fianchettoed and facing the rook on A8, so that's pretty dangerous, I think. Discovered moves like like E5, will become pretty dangerous. But overall, I think basically Black's doing White a favor by allowing this development on Bishop F3. Knight C6, E5, Knight takes D4, and on Bishop takes A8, White's basically secured a pretty solid material advantage. He's up basically a piece here. Or an exchange and a pawn. So yeah, um, pretty good game for White. But let's slow it down and go back to the earlier part. Um, okay, so we're still in theory here. Bishop E2 is played, and that's that deals with this bishop to G4 pin fairly well. White has center control, and overall, I think pretty good control of the situation. It's plus 1.12. There's not really much way for Black to make headway, and undermining moves like C5 are probably Black's best chance to create an imbalance that's exploitable. B6 leads to some opportunities. Bishop takes, and then knight to C6. Um, the eval is at plus zero point 0.4. So really, the deviation from theory here played out really badly, really quickly for Black, and it sort of makes sense. I mean, B6 is an unusual move to be playing here. The value of B6 over a straightforward developing move like Knight C6 tends to be the ability to position the bishop on bishop to B7. With bishop to B7, you have a fianchetto. Here, you're basically, not securing a fianchetto if you're trading off the bishop, and are instead just sort of generating a weakness on B7 here. So I guess that is, that's a suboptimal move, and the eval shows it. Here you have the fianchettoed bishop on F3, and then the knight, basically compounds this vulnerability. This knight is difficult to defend on c6. So with this discovered e5, White has secured a pin on this rook on e8, and as well as threatening this knight on f6. This is going to lead to a material gain for White. But yeah, it's kind of wild how dangerous that got. Basically, with b6 and bishop takes f3, this discovery, d5 or e5 and then pawn takes f6 is really put into place. So those two errors by Black really compound. White's done the right thing. White's basically played, in a way that's consistent with theory. But opening up this diagonal was an error for Black, and basically playing this, and basically being willing to trade this bishop, which would naturally go on this diagonal, and the fact that the bishop's not there and sort of makes b6 not have the same goals as it normally does, causes a problem. So h3, bishop takes f3, knight to c6, and e5. Bishop takes a8, queen takes, and castles. And by now, White's basically showing an almost insurmountable edge. We can go through it just to make sure that, this game stays relatively, in play. But, really the game collapses in two moves. It's really pretty interesting. Uh, you know, on move 9 or so, we're still in established opening theory. So bishop e2, and then there's still move 8 with 12 games having been played in the opening book. But here, there's nothing that White can do really. Or basically nothing that White is adding. It's more just that this discovered check is almost generated by Black. still has to execute tactically and play d5, play this e5 move to secure the discovery. But the combination of the two moves here really creates a problem. I think it points to a pretty good, a good kind of positional demonstration. B6 is not a move that makes sense unless you're going to fianchetto the bishop. Um, or maybe if you're defending against an advance on c5. But overall, b6 does not really help that situation too much. Um, this steers towards a position in which there's vulnerability on the white squares, and black doesn't really get much compensation for it. So yeah, I guess I would say before a move like b6 or before a move like g6, have a good reason to do it, usually related to fianchettoing the bishop. If you don't have that reason, it creates weaknesses that could potentially be exploited. B6 is not a developing move. It's basically a move that supports the development of pieces specifically to the fianchetto diagonal. If you don't do that, if you don't do that or you don't have the potential to do that, it's really just a move that creates weakness. So knight c6 would be the correct move here, I think. Knight c6 or the book proposes knight fd7. But b6 is a kind of a risky play. H3 is a straightforward move. I mean, putting pressure on the bishop. Queen d2 is probably an alternative. Castles is an alternative, but I think h3 is fine. But the issue now is really just with this open fianchetto and this potential for a discovered threat on e5. White's causing some pretty quick damage. E5 is probably black's best move here. E5 at least cements this bishop on f3, so it's not threatening the a8 rook. But knight c6 and d5 secure a winning material advantage for white. So basically, there's some aspects of this where black basically really helped white's position. White needed to play the correct moves to exploit that vulnerability, but that's basically what happened in this game. Very solid play by white. Great job, playing, an opening basically an opening combination that, basically white played opening theory. Here, prior to b6, white's playing mainline Grunfeld theory. 12 master games are played there. So basically, white played like a master. Black made some missteps out of theory, and white, having played theory, was in a position to exploit them. Yeah, solid win. It's hard to add much to a game like that. You played theory correctly, and then your opponent misstepped from theory in a way that was exploitable. So that's a win. Good job by JD Mintz. Very solid. Let's take a look at the second one. Thank you very much for sending the game in, JD Mintz, and please post more games in the theory if that's possible, or in the Discord if you're interested. Sorry. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and I haven't seen this game before, but let's take a look. There's a good tactical win. But yeah, so this looks like a Guaco piano game that's relatively equal until until basically black allows a fork on g4 that allows white to secure a winning material advantage. Here, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, d3, and this is mainline Guaco piano theory. Okay, bishop takes e6, f takes e6, a3, bishop takes, and yeah, black's looking pretty, basically black and white are both looking kind of in a traditional place. Let's take a look at we've stepped out of theory here. I think this bishop to b4, only leads to one game. The book response to bishop b4 is bishop b5. I think bishop d2 is just fine. But that's the main line. The main line Guaco piano line is bishop to b5. White instead plays bishop d2. I don't see any obvious problems with that, so I think it's pretty strong. D6, h3, bishop e6, pawn takes. And overall, I think White's got a pretty solid position here. Let's check the eval, but yeah, White secured the initiative. Don't look like there's any impending problems with the pawn center. Overall, some pressure probably getting exerted on e5. You know, d5 can't be played, so this pawn structure is somewhat cemented for Black. Um, it's an open game, so White's bishop is more valuable than the knight as a general policy. And yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty smooth sailing for White. Lots of games still left to be played, but White's secured a good position out of the opening. Um, Black castles queenside here. So this gives White kind of a fixed target for attack. Movement of b4 and b5. And this game has basically turned. Black's trying to turn this into a game where he attacks on White's. Where he basically pawn storms White's king side, and White's turning this into a game where he pawn storms on Black's queen side. So basically, alternative flanks getting attacked here, but White has better pieces and better piece placement. So especially after this knight has to move to the 8th rank, or lose a pawn, I guess. This basically b5 forces the knight to move either to the 8th rank or to lose material. So either way, after b5, White's got a solid position and is closer to his goal of attacking Black's queen side than Black is to his goal of attacking White's king side. But here's an actual. As opposed to the options here were knight b8, knight d8, or knight e4 or knight d4. Knight b8 or d8 basically undeveloped the knight. So I get the resistance to playing that. But it's still probably preferable to losing that material on d4 outright. So the engine is suggesting those two moves over knight to d4. On knight d4, knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, and bishop takes d4. And basically, White has a more advanced attack and a material edge. This position looks pretty solid. E5 gets played, and now Black is going to try advancing. And White will need cautious defense. But overall, this is going to favor things for White. And then I think it's a solid move. It's not a trap. But d4 allows a temporary loss of defense on e4. But on that loss of defense, queen g4 becomes possible, forking the king and knight here. So the pawn on e4 was never legitimately hanging on this move. Basically it's a good break for White because he's trading his d3. White's trading the d3 pawn for Black's e5 pawn. So in this move, White's trying to make a favorable trade of pawns in the center. But after d4, basically the e4 pawn was never really hanging, and White's trying to make this favorable trade of pawns. D4 is played. That fork is made, and queen takes e4 secures a winning advantage for White. But overall, d4, d4 is an interesting idea. I really understand the desire for this trade. The engine is suggesting White continue his attack on the king side, maybe with the a4, a5, and then potentially bishop takes a7. But d4 makes sense too. I guess specifically, I think it's probably better to continue this attack. Black is attacking you on the flank. So it's probably good to attack Black on his vulnerable flank, his castling flank. And the reason to do that is basically because the attack is going to get mobilized as quickly as it can for both sides. But d4 is d4 is a little bit slower. This is a good trade. This d3 for e5, but it's not as good as it's not as good as basically the it's not as good as advancing the kingside attack. This attack may improve White's position if things play out perfectly, but the attack offers more and is sort of needed, immediately against Black's relatively immediate attack. So I guess I would say a4 here over d4. But again, it's one of those situations. D4 caused, basically set up this trap on e4, which wins White the game. So in some ways, it's sort of difficult to assess that kind of position because what you played won the game and it was a great win, and obviously what you did was adequate. But from a theoretical perspective, it's sort of a4 is objectively better than d4, and the reason is because White needs a similarly quick attack to match Black's attack. If both sides play their quickest attack, White will win, and that's a reason why this advancement of the queenside attack is the correct response to this advancement of the kingside attack. But overall, very interesting. Interesting way that this went. Uh, so, yeah, let's go back and take a look. Um, Bishop to c4, bishop to c5, d3. This is a pretty normal game. Nothing too much here. And yeah, I guess I would say, at the end of the day, White basically secures an initiative, runs into some difficulty or at least some challenges when Black starts to advance his attack, and plays this d4 move. Really, the only suggestion that I have for White out of this game is the value of matching Black's flank attack with your own flank attack. D4 is a little bit too slow. A4, A5, A6 is a more logical, I think, way to play this. But what you did was obviously fine, and even with D4, White's showing a positive eval. So at the end of the day, it really was a well played game by White. Not too much deviation out of opening theory. I think B5 was a great idea. It put pressure on this knight to either undevelop or Black to lose a pawn. Black chose to lose the pawn, and up material, White's in good shape with a good attack about to come on the kingside flank. But this tactical trap works out great, and the game sort of resolves early. So yeah, overall pretty solid. Knight f3, knight c6, and I think overall not too much to improve on. Solidly played. Yeah, fork, and yeah, White's winning. And converts fairly cleanly. So I think that's good. I think it's a good game. Italian game, pretty similar to the way I would have played it. This b5 was a good tactic, and maybe just consider attacking on the flank to match Black's attack on the flank. But a good win at the end of the day, regardless. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. Very interesting game. Cool. So let's look at the next one. So this was all drawn from the chess study Discord. I think just because I have a second here, I'm gonna post a link to that Discord and see if any of you guys are interested in joining it. I think it's a Discord where basically, there's an emphasis on free study, and it's been a good place to kind of draw games for this channel and to get good material. So I'm just gonna post that in the chat, and if anyone wants to join it, I think I think it's awesome. I think it's great. Really like a super good vibe and you know, a real commitment to free chess resources, which I think is fantastic. Um, so yeah, so let me pull the link and I will get that right now. Yeah, so this link is to the Discord. It's great, great Discord. Uh, yeah, yeah, no. So I think that's a good Discord if you guys want to check if you guys want to check things out. I think that's a pretty good place to do it. Um, free study resources if that's what you're into, and I think that's generally what people are into on this channel. Let me pull up an analysis for it for our third game. Um, cool. This is Caro-Kann. This game was sent by Hilbert Wolfgang, and it's yeah, pretty solid. This is mainline Caro-Kann. What happens now is bishop d3, bishop takes d3, and queen takes d3. Um, I think I'm gonna go slowly through this, cause this game is played by an expert, and he plays the Caro-Kann main line correctly. So if anyone wants to see the Caro-Kann main line, I can play through it twice pretty quickly, and everyone hopefully can learn it, cause I think at the end of the day, the mainline Caro-Kann is probably something that even if it's not something that you're interested in or you're an E4 player, it's probably something that you should know. It's theory that generally I think someone should, should add to their at least knowledge base for chess. Even if there's no better reason than just because you'll it'll help what people are talking about. So this is the way that this opening goes. This is Caro-Kann, and in this game it's actually knight to d2. But mainline Caro-Kann is knight to c3, and with pawn takes e4, they transpose to the same. Knight to d2 is the fourth most popular move here. Knight c3 is the most popular, but they turn out in exactly the same place. So that's really the that's the bottom line. Knight g3, bishop g6, h4, h6, and then a move that people sometimes forget here is h5. H5 pushes the bishop to h7, and it helps it basically helps advance this pawn a little bit further. This h5 pawn can be restrictive. There are times when black will want to play g5 freely, and pawn takes g6 en passant will be a move that stops that. So h5, bishop h7, knight f3, knight d7, bishop d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3. And I'd really just sort of suggest burning that into your mind. Like that's a good that's a good opening for white. The mainline Caro-Kann, I'm sure this evaluates as roughly equal. But white's position here is considered to be good or no worse than equal. So yeah, so I'm just gonna look at potential sidelines here. The opening book is suggesting knight to f3 here, and I assume h5 on the next move. So that's a little bit of a transposition, but either way, this leads us to this mainline Caro-Kann position. So yeah, so pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop f5, knight g3, and yeah, overall pretty solid. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't explored knight to d2. I've kind of expected that knight to c3 is the main line. But against knight to g6, that's interesting. So I assume that means that the knight transposes its development at some point to either b3 or c4. So yeah, since you brought, it's super interesting, and I don't know it myself. So since you brought it up, let's take a look. But just so everyone knows, this queen takes d3 on move 10 is the mainline Caro-Kann. Queen takes d3 on move 10 is sort of how you know you've played the mainline Caro-Kann correctly. But yeah, let's take a look at knight d2. Cause I don't know this so well. I play the main line, so let's assume that D takes e4, and we're in exactly the same place. It doesn't matter. But instead, knight d2 g6 is a pretty interesting alternative. Um, so I guess the main line here is g knight to f3. Then black plays bishop to g7. White plays c3. Knight h6. Bishop d3. And yeah, white looks pretty comfortable. I understand I think I understand what why the reason is. I think you're right. Futaport. I think that's totally correct. Now that I look at it. And I think the advantageous thing about playing knight d2 in the situation that you talked about, so against this g6 or against this bishop f5, this it's helpful because on g6, like not pawn takes, so g6 here, having the knight on d2 allows for the pawn to play to c3, and as opposed to if on knight c3, g6 is played, this is stuck on c2 and can't be supported. So overall, knight c3 is the main line. But it makes sense that in a g6 type situation, knight to d2 would be better than knight to c3. Let's check the eval just because I'm sort of curious about this now. Because that makes sense that threat would be good. Knight to d2, and it looks like it's about plus, and then g6, and it looks like white's at about 1.04. Although it's sort of bouncing around a little bit. But I bet what you're saying is right, Feudaport. I think that I bet having the knight d2 is better eval against g6. So let's look at knight c3 and g6, and then yeah, I mean I think they're they're very close. It looks like they're very close to being equal. But I think having this extra option with this knight or with this pawn on c3 is probably the explanation for why knight d2 would be better than knight c3 on g6. I mean, either way, g6 is not the best way to play the Caro-Kann, but that is a little bit encouraging to play. It does sort of seem like that encourages you to play knight d2 against the Caro-Kann, except as opposed to knight c3. And actually, if you look at this eval right here, they're both at 0.78, so evaluated is completely equal. So yeah, knight d2, or knight c3 evaluated by the computer is completely equal, and I was always taught knight to c3, but that makes me think about it because I think against g6, having the knight on d2 is better than knight on c3. But of course, that's a sideline that people don't play anyways. I mean, the most common move by far in both situations is pawn takes e4. So at the end of the day, I guess it doesn't matter. If your opponent plays g6, you've secured a superior position as white against the Caro-Kann. But with the knight on d2, it may be slightly better. Yeah, no, that's pretty interesting, Feudy. I think it's an interesting thinking. Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, so knight takes e4, knight g3, and then either knight f3 or h5 here. It says that the opening book is suggesting knight f3. They're both played, and they both transpose into the same place. So knight d7, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, bishop takes, queen takes, and the Caro-Kann line is yeah, no, I think everyone, I think 95% of games, your opponent's going to play d takes e4 as opposed to g6. G6 looks worse for black, so it makes sense to be playing pawn takes e4, and in that case, it doesn't matter, because the knight's going to take e4 on the next move anyways. But that is an interesting intricacy, Beauty. So thank you for sharing that. All right, so just so everyone knows, and I'll play through it one more time. This is just opening theory that I would figure that, virtually all higher level players would know, and it has to basically go exactly like this. Um, Either knight d2 or knight to c3, pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, knight to g3, bishop g6, and then the knight's development on g3 and f3. The bishop moves to d3. The bishop takes from h7, and the queen takes on d3. This is the mainline Caro-Kann. I feel like it will be helpful to know exactly what what the improvement is, regardless. It's basically helpful to know what the main line is, regardless of your situation. It never hurts to know a 10 move very favored main line. E6, and then the moves here most generally are either bishop to d2 or bishop to f4. Castling's not bad, but it is somewhat committal for white here. There are potential ways that black can start aggressively attacking on the king side, in which case it might be helpful to consider castling queen side. But anyways, nothing is wrong with castles. It's just not the main line, and it could potentially lead to an attack on the king side. Knight gf6, rook e1, and then black ends the time in the opening book with bishop e7. Here the positions evaluated is pretty close to equal. A theme in the Caro-Kann can sometimes be having your rook on e1 and pinning the pawn on e6. But overall, I think it's pretty good. I think white's in a pretty smooth position here. Basically the engine doesn't like the awkwardness of bishop d6. Um, it prefers, either probably bishop to b4 or bishop to e7. I would probably play bishop to e7 here. Bishop to d6 exposes this bishop on d6 to attack. On knight f5, there needs to be a responding move to defend this bishop. Whereas bishop e7, disallows knight f5 because the pin's no longer there. So I guess I would say in this position, I advocate bishop to e7 over d6, because bishop to d6 allows this extra move for white, exploiting this pin on e8. Anyways, bishop d6, knight f5, bishop f8, and it's pretty smooth sailing for white. Straightforward development, good control of the center. White has a much better center here. And whenever the king moves off of this pin, the knight will have to move away from f5. No problem, Aphelion. No, thank you very much for joining the stream. We're just going through some games here. Bishop d2, queen c7, d5, and overall, this is pretty favorable to white. Looks like there's a real tactical bust coming up in a second, but d5 makes sense. Putting pressure on e6, which is a pinned pawn. Thank you for joining, Aphelion. Always happy to see you. So e5 here, and this pawn on e6 is getting threatened pretty heavily by the pin and the pawn on d5. Rook c1, and then queen c7, and d6 looks pretty crushing here. Let's see if they take it to a material lead, but this is really going to cause a lot of problems for black. With d6, basically, white secures bishop's position as stuck on f8, without an improvement on position. So let's see. So d6, threats on e5. Looks pretty good. White plays queen b5, but this threat on e5 is extremely dangerous. This has a good chance of becoming overwhelming, I think. Black is in a lot of trouble here. I think basically this e5 pawn is getting pretty close to being hung, and very dangerous. Additionally, and what white's playing for here as a potential line is knight takes, rook takes, queen takes, and e1. After white's basically got a good is basically going to win material, win back black's queen, and have simplified in a pretty solid way. So yeah, so overall, bishop d6 is something for black to revisit, but I think white's played a solid main line. Basically, by the way, uh, you know, black white is an expert here, so a pretty solid game is expected. Um, the threats on e6 are good. I like the way that white played that. And it looks like this situation gets pretty constricted for black. In many ways, rook takes is actually the weakest move of the game, I think. Although one leads to black's resignation. Just from an eval perspective, the immediate knight takes d6, knight takes d6, queen takes d6, bishop c7 wins this knight and almost certainly a winning a winning improvement in material. Rook takes e5 and this pin is pretty killer. So yeah, pretty interesting. Um, let's see. I don't have much to offer white in terms of improvement. I think it's a pretty solidly played game. But here, bishop d6 allows knight f5, solid. Bishop f8, c4, and then yeah, d5. Um, looks pretty good. I think no game is perfect, and that inefficiency at the very end is something that there was a better tactical possibility. I mean, this this is slightly better this is slightly better for white. But that's really the only suggestion. I mean, I'm going to take one more look, but basically you play, it's sort of similar to the first game. Main line was played. Black played a bad deviation from main line, and then white capitalized. Sometimes it's really helpful to know the main line. I think the most instructional thing, rook c8 there instead. Let's take a look. Well, rook c8, yeah, rook c8, yeah, here at the end of Aphelion, yeah, totally. Rook c8 is also very busting. This game is one for white. Yep. No, I like it. I like it. Aphelion's referring to this tactical improvement. Yep, looks good to me. Yeah, looks good to me. Good work. Rook takes, queen takes, knight takes d6 is another way to simplify and basically end the game as white. The computer most prefers this one, but at this point we're all sort of yeah. No, thank you very much, Aphelion. Appreciate all the help. But yeah, they're basically tactical combinations and white capitalizes. It's pretty good. Uh, you know, um, uh, you're sort of splitting hairs here at the end. But both of those two alternatives, either rook to c8 or knight takes d6, bishop c7, are slight improvements over rook c6. That said, rook c6 is also winning. So yeah, just in terms of the narrative of the game, this basically works out as white plays the main line, black deviates from the main line with this somewhat awkward bishop d6 move, and then white gets to play knight f5, and it's basically a 2 pawn advantage or 1.5 pawn advantage, and a relatively easy position to play as white. So I think the most instructional value is something that white did correctly in this game. But I think for everyone else watching, it's important to get the mainline Caro-Kann right, because this game shows that basically one misstep can cause pretty serious inefficiencies that your opponents might be able to capitalize on. So here, pawn takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop f5, knight g3, h4, bishop g6, h4, h6, and just so you guys know, this is material that's been played about 10,000 times in this opening book. It's a very well established main line that I think it's helpful to know. Knight f3 or h5 transposing into the same place. Knight d7, bishop d3, bishop takes d3, and queen takes d3. And this is yeah, this is solid. Cool. Yeah, thank you for the highlighted message, Dennis. That's cool. I didn't even know how to do. I don't know how to do that, but that's cool. So thank you for the redeem. I gotta learn Twitch better, but looks like a that's looks like something cool. So awesome. Yeah. So, anyways, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and you're in the mainline Caro-Kann. And then the next few moves are there are opportunity for deviation. But black's bishop d6 allows knight is an inefficiency, and it allows knight to f5, and white's white's in a good place. Uh, so yeah, so that's the main thing. I think the instruction is learn the mainline Caro-Kann. Sometimes if you play it, your opponent will make an inefficient misstep and you'll win. That's what happened in this one. Good game. Thank you very much for showing it, Hilbert. Really appreciate it, and yeah, please keep sending them my way. Well played game for sure. Um, let's take a look at the next one. Okay. Um, Yeah, no, Caro-Kann can be pretty tricky. It was dangerous. I mean, that bishop d6 allowing knight f5, was an error. And basically, after that error, white was showing a plus 1.5 eval. The bishop e7 was the move, because bishop e7 prevents knight f5. But once bishop d6 was played, and the knight was able to get outposted, with the threat on f5, I mean, it was pretty, not over, but certainly pretty solidly in White's favor. So anyways, that was interesting. A good capitalizing on what seems like a small error by Black. Dangerous lines. Cool. All right. Here's House Lines game. Thank you very much for sharing this one in the chess study uh Discord. Well, let's take a look. French advance. C5 looks good. I'm sort of curious, just in terms of frequency of openings. E5 advanced French is a little bit out of favor, so it's the third most popular. Knight C3 is what I play. That's the main line. Knight D2 is also playable. C5 here is basically the main line. And then white goes to a pretty distantly played fourth position with d takes c5. The main line here for white in the Caro-Kann is c3. But instead, white plays d takes c5, bishop takes c5, and I think black's leading in development, and one of the main things in the French, which I brought up a few times on this stream, is basically there's a concept. I think of it as being associated with fine, but I think it's true, so it's a good general concept, which is French games, and who wins French games and who has better chances in French games is pretty much evaluated by the placement of these pawns on d4 and e5. The idea is that if white can maintain both of these pawns on d4 and e5 to the end of the game, that tends to be a win for white. If they get disrupted, that tends to be either equal or slightly better for black. So basically, Black's game in the French is centered around disrupting this pawn structure, which will win for white if it's allowed to continue without interruption. So for that reason, undermining moves like c5 and f6 are big pieces of the French. So anyways, what ends up happening here, d takes c5, basically surrenders, a lot of white's chances. That pawn structure d4 e5 is not supposed to move or change. Yeah, Jen got an order from Costco, so she just walked out, and she's going downstairs. I'm sure she'll be back in a minute, and yeah, she got a full Costco order. Um, Small apartment. Living in New York is tricky, there's a lot of stuff going on all the time. But yeah, so pawn takes c5 is is disrupts white's center pawns. So with bishop takes c5 and knight f3, black's basically showing better. I'm pretty sure the analysis will confirm this. As soon as d takes c5 is played, actually, this bishop takes c5, shows better options for black. It really is a pretty good rule of thumb. Maintaining these pawns on d4 and e5 in the French, if that can be done by white, white's better, and if not, black is equal or better. So doing a move like pawn takes c5 is not a common one, and goes against that principle of maintaining the d4 e5 combination. Bishop takes c5, knight f3, knight e7. But we're way off into sidelines here, and sidelines that favor black. So bishop g5. I'm wondering about queen b6. Queen b6 basically looks like a pretty good tactic. I don't know if there's a way that black can respond to it. This quick b6 here secures an attack on f2 and on b2, and it looks like shows a pretty good eval for black. So I think black's made a number of errors here. The first one's a very positional one and revolves around the ideas behind the chess openings, like keep those pawns on d4, e5, and work to maintain them as white in the French. And then basically this turns into a material gain. Let's just see. So okay, so queen b6 was actually delayed, and bishop to d3 was played. But queen b6, the issue was never solved by white, so the same fork applies a move later. B on d2, knight c6, and overall, I mean, I basically think black's winning here. This e5 is vulnerable. There might be attacking chances with like bishop b4, bishop c3, and then like a fork here or something. But this pawn's relatively isolated here. White could also undermine it with f6, and then if the f6 pawn or if the f7 pawn gets traded for the e5 pawn, white's just basically got an undisputed center, and there's a lot of value in that. Queen plays to c1, queen to b4. I don't know. This is kind of interesting. I might think that the line that I would think of if queen to c1 was played, I would think like rook takes c1 and then maybe f6, because I think that this undisputed center that black will get with e6 and d5 is going to be pretty powerful. Interesting. Yeah, no, the Caro-Kann and the French can transpose pretty freely. That actually happens a lot. The French and the Caro-Kann, basically the difference between them is generally the placement of the rook on, or sorry, the bishop on the white squared bishop. Like the Caro-Kann, what ends up happening is the bishop gets to f5, whereas in the French, d7 and e6 prevent the bishop from ever getting to e5 or f5. But there's a lot of transpositional possibility there, for sure. So anyways, I would think about that, and that those transpositions are super interesting. But the pawn structures can actually end up very similar. It's cool how openings transpose into each other. I mean, we were looking at some queen's pawn games that were transposing into the Sicilian the other day, and yeah, chess is, it's kind of, I really think it's cool. A lot of cool stuff and the way that things can evolve. But yeah, you're right. Caro-Kann and French can transpose into each other for sure. Here, bishop takes c7, queen b4, c4, and yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if this is the most efficient thing for black to do. At this point, maybe it's better, to start simplifying. Black's got a lot of advantage here, a number of different advantages. The main weakness for black is this bishop on c8, but advantages are things like this is really an advantage in center control for black. The e4 and c4 squares, black both has pretty comfortably. Um, the e5 pawn is vulnerable. Black really has a better center here. And once he finds a good place to put that white squared bishop, he's going to be in good shape. So for that reason, I was considering that queen takes c1 might be the best play. But even after queen b4, black still got the center control. Um, I think we might be getting close to a tactical win here. Um, let's just look at the computer line. Queen takes c4, bishop takes c4, bishop d7. Yeah, no, I like f6. I think f6 is especially earlier. Yeah, no, I agree. I think f6 undermining the white center and basically giving black complete control of the center with e6 and d5. I think f6 is a good undermining move. There are other attempts at e5 that could be done with pieces, but the undermining move secures, basically black is the only player with pawns on the D or E file. So that's pretty good. So yeah, so just playing through this, bishop e4. I don't know. I might have tried bishop c6 here, but in any case, bishop e4, b6, rook d2, rook takes, and yeah. Somehow we've gotten off the main line. Okay. Um, Queen b6, rook d. This is back to the game. In the game, white plays queen b6 and still shows a pawn advantage. Um, but I don't know. I think f6. I think f6 might be a missed opportunity here. Um, Trading this c4 pawn, which is isolated and not very strong, for black's d5 pawn, which is connected and relatively advanced, is kind of a bad trade for black. I wonder if there's an opportunity, if black will have an opportunity to sidestep that. Pawn takes c4, queen b6, and yeah, black's looking pretty good. On bishop takes, so I think maybe there's another tactical issue, with rook takes c6. But with bishop takes c6, black has a bishop pair in now what's a relatively open position. The bishop has an opportunity to get posted on b4. A lot of advantages for black here. Potentially a cool looking discovery, bishop takes f3, discovery on the queen. But let's see the tactical issue with rook takes c6, which is what happened in this game. Okay. Yeah, that is a real tactical issue. Rook to c6. So what's dangerous about this is rook to c6 introduces white's mating threat, which as a mating threat is something that black necessarily has to respond to. With rook takes c6, the queen threatens mate in 1 and secures tempo. So black has to choose between g6 and f5, but either way, black has a loss of time, which is going to be responded to by bishop to b5, bishop to g6, bishop to b5, and this position already favors white, before some pieces get hung. Yeah, so unfortunately, black's position, after playing really a very good game and securing a good middle game, deteriorates pretty quickly. So this is really interesting. Black's position here is good. This pawn structure is good. Ideas, black, secures a material advantage and isolates these two sets of pawns. Things are going very well for black here. I like the f6 possibility. Basically securing this center, and maybe even potentially allowing for e5 to be played. Basically f6, pawn takes f6, bishop takes f6, or some other alternative like rook e1, pawn takes e5, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, rook takes. I mean, there's a number of ways in which f6 can help to simplify the center. Um, but what ends up happening is these two pawns, remain unchallenged, and as opposed to that opening principle we were talking about with white controlling the center on d4 and e5, black instead, has control of the center with e6 and d5, and white has no center at all with the pawns. So it's sort of a flip of the way that the French normally goes. Um, Potentially simplifying here could be a good idea. I guess, I don't know. Queen takes c4 looks pretty good to me. Um, this is just relatively simple. Black's up a pawn, and has a bishop pair in what's going to become an open position. I guess here I would say, and the biggest correction that I can offer to black from a strategic perspective, I think, is to simplify if down material. I think black doesn't do that, more or less. I mean, this is a great opportunity to trade off, white's biggest attacking piece for your queen. So queen trade. And the queen trade should really favor you, right? Because you have an extra pawn and a bishop pair. So overall, I don't know. I guess I would say, walking away from this, I would say, black should recognize when he's up material, and trade off, white's pieces that have the most potential for attack. Simplify when up material. Because this unfortunately got very out of control tactically, and then black's position deteriorates, which is really unfortunate. Black had a good opening and a good middle game, but this queen got very dangerous. This tactic on e4 got very dangerous for black. So the first thing, I would say, uh, this when in a complicated and volatile game, tactical study is super important. At this point, I feel like everyone knows it's chess.com, or really any tactics trainer. Chess Tempo is cool too. Um, so that's the first piece of advice. The second piece of guidance, I think, here is, when up material, trade off the dangerous attacking pieces. The simpler it gets when up material, the higher your chances of winning are. This was a good opportunity to trade off queens, and unfortunately, that queen ended up really being very instrumental to black's, or to white's attack, and white's, ultimately winning pressure on the black position. It's really kind of a bummer. I think you played a great game, and it's a good demonstration of the French, and why the French center pawns are important. I feel like black had a very good opportunity to win this game. And the takeaway from it is if up material, trade off the potential attackers. Otherwise, I think you played a great game. You played a great game, Houseline, and it's a bummer that it ended that way, because looking at this perspective, I think, yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think just, if you're up material, trade off your the pieces that can hurt you, or provide you the best opportunity, provide your opponent the best opportunity to launch an attack. Um, yeah, no. It's a really good game. I really like the way that black played this game. And it was really instructive. I think this is a great instructive example of why d4 and e5 are important in the French, and why white's game and white's chances involve retaining that d4 e5 pawn structure. And then black walks out of the opening and early middle game with a pretty solid edge. But here was your opportunity to trade the queens, and I think, once you trade the queens, this is a consolidated position, and I think you're a lot stronger. Wow, that's great to hear. That's great to hear, Amet. I'm really happy that you're getting that you're getting something out of it. I'm sure the most important thing is the tactics training that you've done on your own. But I'm really happy to hear that you're getting something out of the stream because I really enjoy doing the stream and I'm happy if it's helpful. Um, so yeah, so here was your opportunity to trade the queens. The queen got more dangerous than I think it ideally would have gotten, and with this simplification, yeah, black's showing good chances. I like it. It looks good. Um, so yeah. Thank you very much for the observe GM Shadow. Appreciate it. Thank you. Um, so yeah. I think that leads to a better game for black. But that's the main takeaway. The queen trade. The queen trade. I think probably would have led to a win there. But it's good. A very instructive game. Um, all right, two more. Uh, cool, awesome. Another Traxler game uh, is it was this Jay or sorry who was this a Felions game? I've forgotten, but these Traxler theory games are super interesting. Um, Traxler is this line that leads to a lot of very aggressive attacks for black. Very double edged. It was A takes this game, Aphelion. Now that I remember, now I remember. I sometimes I it takes me a second, but this is A takes this game. So let's look at this. Um, so the defining line of the Traxler for anyone who doesn't know is basically it's an Italian game from white with the two knights response from black. The knight plays to g5, going for like the kind of early threat on f7 and fried liver type position. Thanks for the Traxler game, Atex. Yeah, we've gone through some cool ones related to it. Um, yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, let's give it another look. There's many sidelines and many ways to exploit deviations from from the theory. But this overall leads to some danger. Or basically, there's a lot of sidelines to take a look at. Um, this would be an example of one of the things that can go very quickly wrong for black. So here, knight takes e4, king e1, queen h4, knight takes, and then pawn takes. And basically this leads to the king needing to leave that file. So here, but the Traxler just again is knight takes f7, and then bishop takes f2. And the preferred move for white is king f1. This is a better move for white. On king takes f2, very dangerous things can happen. So here, knight takes e4. And then either king e1, but the preferred move is king to g1. But here instead, the king plays to e1, and that's more or less an immediate loss. So just so we know, this knight goes up and threatens this f7 pawn. Bishop c7 goes, and then knight takes f7, bishop takes f2, king takes, knight takes, and king to e1. And this is already a loss. This is already a loss for white. Black plays queen h4, knight takes, and the queen is lost. So overall, yeah, pretty very quick. It's a very quick win for black against or for black against a white misstep. The correct line here is king g1. Um, King g1, queen h4, g3, knight takes, knight takes, knight d4, pawn takes, and overall, this is a much more tenable position for white. Black will end up, getting perpetual check. But really, the thing that sidesteps this super dangerous position is King F1. So let's take a look at a King F1 line. King F1, Queen E7, and just playing out the book here. Knight takes H8, D5, E takes D5, Knight D4, and by this point, White's show it's still very dangerous, but White's showing a positive. C3. Uh, I mean, it's really dangerous. So King F1, yeah, King G1. But I would advise, I think I would advise King F1 here. Um, but yeah, so let's look at King F1 again. King F1, Queen E7, Knight takes H8, Bishop B6, and Knight C3. Still many things that can go wrong. The Queen threatens mate with Queen C5. Queen E2 is forced. I guess or Bishop F. This is some real craziness. So Bishop F7, and then the king has to go somewhere, and then Queen E2 or Queen F3. I guess is better. But I mean these positions are just super difficult to play. What does analysis say about Bishop takes F7? Um, I don't know. Let's see. They both look playable. Knight takes F7 seems to give a slightly better eval. In terms of what's more common, Bishop takes is more common. So the main line, I guess, is Bishop takes, even though the eval is listing it as Knight takes. Bishop takes, King E7, Bishop D5, Rook F8. But to be honest here, I think if White can get castling in, that takes a lot of the pressure off of Black. White's looking better here. Yeah, but castles provides White with a lot better. I feel much more comfortable with White's position having castled here. 1.4 it looks like, and the Black Queen will go to E8 and then G6. Yeah, probably. So yeah, Bishop takes F7, I guess. They're both alternatives. They both have specifics, but it's kind of interesting how this game can get so dangerous in what's a relatively equal position. Bishop takes F7, King E7, and then I sort of want to play Bishop to B3. Bishop to B3 is kind of interesting. Yeah, no, totally, Aphelion. The only thing I would say about this opening is that there's, the opening requires knight G5 and knight F7. So, that I guess I would say is sort of, I mean, if it's coming to be, knight G5 is an aggressive move. On knight G5, the main move here is D5. And D5, pawn takes D5, knight A5, and basically, Black has a pretty solid position against, or Black basically has a pretty solid and much quieter position. But it's super dangerous. I mean, I definitely don't know this theory. I would be the type of person who would sidestep this with D5 and call it a day. But for the people who want to see this full thing executed, knight takes, bishop takes, king F1, queen E7, knight takes, D5. But I feel like if you're gonna play D5, I would have played it, earlier in the opening before all this mess. Um, but it's a very pretty line. It's really cool to see. Uh, Anyways, E4, E5, um, and just I think at a superficial level, and for anyone who plays Knight G5, yeah, I think it's pretty difficult to secure a Traxler game. But it is a very pretty line to look at, and I'm always interested in expanding my knowledge of it. But for anyone who's new to this stream and hasn't taken a look at the Traxler before, um, it's defined by an Italian game with two knights. The knight goes to g5, the bishop goes to c5, the knight takes or the bishop takes. But if the knight takes, then bishop takes f2, and that's the Traxler opening. And then just in case you ever play against it, which is not super likely, King F1. But it's very pretty. It's a super aggressive, complicated game, and it's a fun game. But it actually has like really well established, defined opening theory, and that there was a Ben Feingold game out of it that I thought was pretty cool. But at the end of the day, yeah, just keep it's a cool one. It's cool knowing in chess that even exists. So, anyways, this game leads to a misplay. After King takes f2, King e1 is not playable. To Queen h4, and then the king gets knocked off the defense of the queen. And the queen gets lost. But yeah, super interesting. Fun as always. You keep sending them, I'll keep reviewing them. So yeah, thank you very much for sending that one, A-Takes. Another way that the Traxler can go horribly wrong for white. Very, very funny stuff. Okay, cool. Let's go to the last one. Okay. This one is two Anons playing. I think that means it's from Tarash. I think Tarash is the one who usually sends those games. And I hope he's here. If he's not here, I'll because I wasn't sure if I was gonna do this tonight or tomorrow. But if it's tomorrow, then he can come back and watch the replay. But it ended up being tonight. So all right. So let's. I haven't seen this before, so I'm just gonna play through it quickly. Looks like Caro-Kann main line. Yeah, the Feingold game. That was really cool, Aphelion. If anyone wants to get a high level Traxler perspective, that Traxler game with Ben Feingold is a really cool one. Which you sent earlier, Aphelion. I'd never seen it before, so it's cool that you sent it. I got to learn about it, and this I feel like we've seen this one before. This is super dangerous. Hey, thank you very much for the follow, Commander. Yeah. Interesting. If we haven't seen this one before, we've seen a similar one with a similar theme. It's cool. So all right. So anyone who's been watching the stream from the beginning should now know how this opening goes to move 10. Let's see what happens. Just so everybody knows it. Mainline Caro-Kann, bishop f5, knight g3, bishop g6, h4, h6, and then h7 or either knight f3 or h5, e6, h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, bishop takes, queen takes. So we're doing it again, and maybe. And then you'd also have to observe, Jen, to get the shout out. But yeah, so here there's a cool thing that happens with some basically bishop takes g3. One of the things that's good about bishop takes g3 is basically I always thought bishop takes g3 was bad for white and strong for black. But one of the things that's helpful for white in bishop to g3 is that this g3 pawn gets the opportunity to be very disruptive in black's position. So here, like g4 and g5 lead to a pretty dangerous situation for black pretty quickly. This basically, this is the concept. Some GMs talk about it of like g5 being a lever that rips open the black king side. That's basically true. G5, and there's no good option for black on the king side here. Black can play pawn takes g5, in which case the h pawn will advance, or if black ignores it and plays like king h7, pawn takes h6, and then either this black pawn on g7 will have to take or play g6. But it really effectively opens up the king side, pretty much regardless. I don't know if this means that black is supposed to castle queenside, maybe. Cool. Thanks for sending the game, Aphil. Oh, is that the Ben Feingold game? Just um, yeah. So for anyone who's interested in learning about the Traxler at a high level, the link that Aphelion just sent is the one that I was referring to. It's pretty cool. Very aggressive stuff, and played by two pretty high level masters. So, cool looking thing. Um, here, yeah, G5. I don't know if this trade was the best. But anyways, the what's really interesting about this game from a thematic perspective is this bishop takes G3, pawn takes G3, leads to good attacks on the black king side with G4 and G5. That's what this trade was really about. These doubled pawns are actually happen to not be weak here. They happen to be, they happen to offer a strong attacking opportunity. Um, so yeah, Rook F1, castles, knight E5, and yeah, white just pushes that pawn, and the situation gets very out of control very quickly for black, and yeah, leads to an early resignation. Um, but here, I guess even I think we've gone over something similar. Here after G4, Knight G3 actually, Knight G3 wins material. So G4 probably wasn't the right move. The same principles hold true, and this G4 G5 push is going to be extremely strong for white. But white can't let these rooks get forked. That's here the knight plays to d4, but on knight g3, black's showing a win of material. Yeah, this is Tarasha's game. So yeah, so knight g4 and or knight g3, and then black's winning material. But the fundamentals are the same, regardless of this kind of execution at the end. This g4 to g5 move is going to put a ton of pressure on black and probably win. White needs to be careful and not do what he did, actually in this game, which is let the knight, do a simple one move fork. But yeah, the same idea, absent that one move, if the move instead is anything that the computer recommends, like rook to h3, or probably rook. I like rook 8 to h3 the best here, as opposed to g4. The position's pretty much exactly the same, and that opportunity doesn't exist, and the king side is still open, so looks like a win for white. Hey, thank you very much, GM Shadow. Thank you very much for the cheer. I appreciate it. I don't know what that means exactly, but I really appreciate you doing that. And thank you very much for being here and observing and supporting the stream. Awesome. Cool. I got to learn my stream. I got to learn my Twitch better because that was cool at least. I like the sound. Yeah. Well, thank you guys. No, thank you guys so much for being supportive and sending material, and I really do like it. It really is. This really is fun for me. So I'm happy that people are getting some value out of it. Jen is chuckling in the background. Yeah, no, thank you very much, GM Shadow, and really just thank you for being here and supporting the stream. Yeah, so here, h6, and yeah, and black's basically busted. Either way, black was pretty busted. Rook to h3, and there would have been big problems, for black. White has good initiative. But yeah, the main positional point, I think this is a really like an illustrative game, as opposed to you know, like this is an instructional game. Is This is a very good demonstration of an interesting tactic in the Caro-Kann, where the bishop takes g3, the pawns get doubled on g3, and the g4, the g pawn can get used as a lever to rip open the king side, which white, you know, white basically does that very effectively. Um, yeah, no, so it's awesome. Really, really interesting, and yeah, good play, good illustrative game sent in by Tarash. If he's not here, I guess we'll have to watch the stream tomorrow. But I really appreciate him contributing in any sense. Um, please, everybody keep sending your games, and yeah, send your games. Having enough material is awesome. I love it. It makes life so much easier, and it makes me happy that people are interested in participating. Um, the thing that uh, yeah, I'm gonna try to improve our side of keeping games and game slots together. I'm hoping we can get that sign up genius thing with the slots well organized. But feel free to send me games on any channel. I'll pick them up and we'll look them over. I really just appreciate the participation and everyone's help making this successful stream. It means a lot to me, and this is a lot of fun for me to do. So, thank you all so much for everything. Um, uh, there's one there was one other thought that I had, but I can't. Uh, it's gonna take me a minute to think about it. Anyways, whatever. The I really appreciate you guys being here. I'm gonna try to streamline our game review signups, and it's awesome that you guys are here. Thanks so much for being here. It means a lot to me. Keep sending those games, and we'll look them over. And Jen's leaving the link to the Discord. Yeah, thanks all for being here. Have a good night, and the next stream is at 10 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow morning. Um, Thank you guys. See you later. Bye.